Okay, good morning, everyone. Nice to see you guys all here today. Welcome to all of you. Welcome to everyone online as well. Our plan for today is I'm going to teach you loving kindness meditation, and then I'm going to do loving kindness meditation with you. After that, we're going to be talking about the fetters of desire for form, desire for formless, and then the fetter of conceit. This evening, we're going to be talking about the fetter of restlessness. This will take us all the way up to the 9th fetter. And then tomorrow, we have a full plan of classes there as well, which I'll talk to you about tomorrow. So just to get us started on understanding loving kindness meditation, because yesterday, we talked about the fetter of ill will. And this fetter of ill will, along with the fetter of sensual desire, you were learning about how to reduce your sensual desire, which helps you to also reduce ill will. But as I was talking, I shared with you about a meditation called loving kindness meditation that's going to essentially help you eliminate ill will out of your mind. So I'm going to teach this to you, and then we're going to actually do it together so that you'll have this as part of your tool belt on your journey to enlightenment. So remember, so far we've done breathing mindfulness meditation. We've done that in the seated, lying, standing, and walking positions. And now we're moving into loving kindness meditation. I've already taught you the meditation to realize non-self as well. Tomorrow, I'm going to help you to understand the meditation to eliminate sexual cravings. But today, we're on loving kindness meditation, where this is going to help you eliminate anger, hatred, and ill will, and all those lesser versions, like frustration, agitation, annoyance, dislike, the mind having resentment and hostility towards others, even negative self-talk within your own mind. If you have a dialogue, an inner dialogue where you're kind of degrading or diminishing this being who you are, this is a great meditation to help you eradicate that from the mind. And by you improving the way that your mind functions, where you have less and less anger, hatred, and ill will in your mind, this is where your relationships can really blossom. Because as long as you're being bitter and harsh or hostile or confrontational or argumentative in your relationships, it's just going to promote unhealthy relationships for you. By the time you get to enlightenment, you'll be able to have healthy relationships with anybody and everybody. And this comes from you purifying your mind and training your mind. Sometimes we think that it's through teaching other people to do things a certain way that you're going to actually get to peacefulness. But the way that you get to peacefulness is by training your own mind. So this loving kindness meditation is really important to be able to help you in your journey to enlightenment and your journey to more harmonious relationships. First, let's talk about what loving kindness is. Loving kindness is active goodwill towards all beings without judgment, a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. Sometimes we might judge other people and decide whether or not we're going to do something for them or not, or whether we're going to practice in a certain way. You're not interested in this. You're not interested in looking down on people or looking up to people. Just consider yourself as being equal. Sometimes people are taught, well, I'm not going to respect you until you respect me. Right? And if everybody was practicing this, where I'm not going to respect you until you respect me, and everybody in the world was practicing that, that means that nobody would be respecting anybody. An enlightened being doesn't function that way. They don't base their practice on what other people are choosing to do. They're going to just always be loving and kind. They're going to always be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful, no matter what other people are choosing to do. Because if you put out disrespect or you put out anger and hatred, this is what's going to come back to you. So by cultivating loving kindness in your mind without judgment, where you're not judging somebody to determine whether they deserve your loving kindness or not, you're just practicing loving kindness at all times with the people around you. And sometimes being loving and kind might mean you need to walk away from a conversation, like we were talking about yesterday. That can be loving kindness too. So loving kindness is having this active goodwill towards all beings without judgment. This is the antidote or the wholesome root or the remedy for anger, hatred, ill will. There's these symptoms that the mind experiences in the unenlightened state, and then there's certain solutions or remedies that the Buddha shares. This is where he gets the reputation of almost being like a doctor, because there's symptoms and then there's a prescription. Well, if you understand that anger, hatred, ill will, frustration, agitation, annoyance, all those discontent feelings, that they're remedied by loving kindness, then you need a technique to bring up this loving kindness in the mind so that it can be permeating, so that then you go out into the world and be loving and kind through your intention, speech, and actions. So that's what this loving kindness meditation is going to do for you. It's almost like filling up your gas tank, and then you go out into the world, and now you can be loving and kind through your intention, speech, and actions. As I've mentioned, it's going to help you eliminate harshness, bitterness, hostility, resentment, and all these other discontent feelings related to the fetter of ill will, and even that negative self-talk within the mind. If you've ever learned the Brahma Viharas, or sometimes they're referred to as the healthy mental states, the 4 healthy mental states that you need to cultivate, loving kindness is one of those. There's loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. These are antidoting and remedying certain symptoms that are in the mind. So loving kindness is the first one, as part of the Brahma Viharas that you might learn at a different time in your journey to enlightenment, that I teach those in different programs and courses. It's in the first book in chapter 14. These are the words of the Buddha in certain places in his teachings where loving kindness is plugging into those teachings based in the Eightfold Path. Because as you guys have learned, the Eightfold Path is the core central teaching of the Buddha. And then there's certain teachings that plug into this. So here I'm just kind of extracting a couple of things where you can see that the loving kindness plugs into the Eightfold Path, because the Eightfold Path is the path to enlightenment. You would need to learn this inside and out in order to be able to train your mind and actually get to enlightenment. So here you can see with right intention, when the Buddha talks about right intention, there's 3 aspects to it. There's the intention of renunciation, the intention of non-ill will, and the intention of harmlessness. And we've talked about this on Monday during the retreat. Well, non-ill will is the same thing as goodwill because it's a double negative. This is where the loving kindness is plugging into intention, or some people call this right thinking or right thought. You need to develop the intention or the thinking or the thought that you have this active goodwill towards other beings, that you have this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, because that's one of the basis of you being able to get to enlightenment. Because if you have hostility or ill will or bitterness in your mind where you want to see harmful things happen to other beings, you're going to do harmful things. And now when you're doing those harmful things are going to come back to you. So you're going to need to develop the thinking or the thoughts of non-ill will or goodwill towards all beings. If you remember back to right speech, when we were talking about the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, the 5th factor is to speak with a mind of loving kindness. And remember, these aren't rules or commandments. These are the natural laws of existence, where the Buddha is helping you to be able to see how to relate to other beings in the world through these natural laws, so that you can have nothing but success and harmony in your relationships. Whereas if you're experiencing bitterness and hostility coming back to you in your relationships, this is because that's what you're putting out. So you're going to need to train your mind to have loving kindness, and then ultimately be able to speak through that loving kindness. Because however you interact in the world through your moral conduct, it's coming from the qualities of your mind. Based on what's going on in your mind, you will function through those qualities. So if you're able to cultivate loving kindness in your mind through developing right intention, now your speech can emanate from that. You can emanate from the loving kindness, where now you can speak in more loving and kind ways and see more improved results in your relationships. But how could you ever do that if you didn't have a technique or a way or a method to be able to cultivate this loving kindness? You wouldn't be able to cultivate it just without any kind of technique or ability to do that. So that's why the Buddha provides this technique or this method of loving kindness meditation to be able to help you to cultivate this in the mind, so that then with your right intention or your right thinking or thought, now your speech can emanate from that, and now you can have more loving and kind conversations, along with all the other factors of the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. Here, this is a teaching from the Buddha that I'm kind of excerpting from one of his teachings. Prior to this, he was talking about the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, and he was reminding his students that, hey, he was teaching them to speak at the proper time. What you say is true, speak gentle, speak beneficially, and speak with a mind of loving kindness. But he was also reminding him that other beings aren't going to speak with you that way. Other beings are going to speak to you untimely. They're going to speak to you falsehoods. They're going to speak to you harshly. They're going to speak to you unbeneficially. They're going to speak to you with a mind of inner hate. As you're making your way to enlightenment, you're going to experience some of this coming back to you, because that's what you've been doing prior to getting on this path. You've made certain unwise decisions to be bitter and harsh and hostile. So all that's going to be coming back to you as you're making your way to enlightenment. And he's essentially reminding his students, like, okay, when people are speaking to you untimely, untrue, harsh, unbeneficial, and with a mind of inner hate, he's saying, herein, monks, you should train thus. Our minds will remain unaffected. right? When people are speaking to you in harsh ways, your mind should remain unaffected. We shall utter no evil words, because as soon as you utter evil words in those relationships, when people are being harsh and bitter to you, that's just keeping the cycle going. The more you put out harshness, it's just going to come back to you. It's not going to extinguish this unwholesome karma if you're putting out evil words, as the Buddha is saying here. So he's saying utter no evil words, because that's what's going to extinguish your unwholesome karma, that more and more people are going to get used to you speaking in loving and kind ways, and more you'll see people speaking with you in that way. We shall reside compassion for their welfare, right? When you see someone being bitter and harsh and hostile, or they're not using the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, you can have concern for their misfortune, that it's so unfortunate that they don't realize by speaking untimely, it's causing them harm. By speaking falsehoods, it's causing them harm. By speaking harsh, it's causing them harm. By speaking unbeneficially or with a mind of inner hate, it's causing them harm. So you can have compassion for their welfare, concern for their misfortune, and with a mind of loving kindness. So that's what he's teaching you, is to cultivate this loving kindness towards this being, where you have nothing but genuine interest in seeing them be well, even though they're not speaking to you in wise ways. Without inner hate, right? We shouldn't be hating anybody. You can cultivate your mind to the point where you have no hate towards any beings whatsoever, including this being who you are. We shall reside enveloping that person with a mind filled with loving kindness. In starting with him, we shall reside enveloping the all-encompassing world with a mind filled with loving kindness, abundant, joyful, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. That is how you should train monks. So he's talking about this loving kindness just permeating in the mind, filling up in the mind, enveloping your mind and enveloping others with this loving kindness. And that's what you would ultimately like to do. And you're going to need to learn how to practice that from the middle way. Because if you have an extensive amount of loving kindness and you have craving in there, now you might worry about the world and all the things that the world's doing. But if you were on the other side where you had inner hate and you were hateful towards people, you're not going to find peace and joy there either. So you even need to come to the middle with your loving kindness, and that's what your mind needs to learn how to do. And that starts with cultivating the loving kindness through the meditation. These are some words from the Buddha about loving kindness meditation, because remember, I teach you guys, don't believe anything. Don't even believe me that the Buddha taught about loving kindness. Here you can see in his own words where he's teaching about loving kindness and loving kindness meditation. And then you can learn it, you can reflect on it, and then you can practice your loving kindness meditation and see the transformation that your mind's making as a result of practicing this. Here in this first one, he's talking to his son, Rahula. Sometimes people think that the Buddha left his family and he never came back. This isn't actually true. He left for 6 years to go on this journey to discover what it takes to be able to get to enlightenment. But then he came back to the area where his family was, and his son, his wife, his mother, essentially his stepmother, his aunt, ordains with him. His cousins and brother-in-laws and things like this were all ordaining with him. So he was helping his family at the same time that he was helping all of humanity. So here he's teaching his son. He says, Rahula, develop meditation on loving kindness. For when you develop meditation on loving kindness, any ill will be abandoned. So it's very clear. This is how a Buddha teaches. They don't have all these teachings that you need to interpret and you need to figure out, and you're not quite sure what he's actually saying. He's a fully, perfectly enlightened Buddha, so his mind's very clear, very crisp, very focused, and he's speaking very concisely and very precisely, because he had eliminated all of his ill will, and he knew that it was this meditation that had done that. So that's why he's saying, hey, this is the way to do it. So yesterday I taught you guys about the symptoms and how to eliminate ill will, and here you can see in the words of the Buddha that he's saying, yes, if you would like to eliminate this fetter of ill will, it's loving kindness meditation that's going to do that for you. But then you also need to practice loving kindness in your day-to-day life through your intention, speech, and actions. That's where the real transformation is happening. You wouldn't be able to just meditate away your ill will. You're going to need to also practice in your day-to-day life through your intention, speech, and actions. And that's this next part where he just says loving kindness should be developed to abandon ill will. So there's the meditation, but then there's the practice of loving kindness through your intention, speech, and actions. And here's another teaching that's kind of an excerpt where the Buddha was talking to his students. I'll just give you some background on this, that you might think that when a Buddha's alive, that it's kind of like the only game in town and everybody would be interested in learning with the Buddha. Well, not everybody knew that he was a Buddha, so not everybody learned with him. There was other people who were teaching at the time that considered their teachings to be what it took to get to enlightenment. And the Buddha knew it was his teachings that led to enlightenment. But these students of other teachers and the students of the Buddha would oftentimes come together, and they would talk and they would chat and they would say, hey, what is your teacher teaching you? And they would say, hey, my teacher's teaching me this, or what is your teacher teaching you? And they would all discuss and have conversations. So here the Buddha is teaching his students about what to talk about when they're with these other students from other teachers. He's saying, suppose they ask, but what, friends, is the reason unarisen anger does not arise and arisen anger is abandoned? You should answer, the liberation of mind by loving kindness. For one who attends carefully to the liberation of mind by loving kindness, unarisen anger does not arise and arisen anger is abandoned. This, friends, is the reason unarisen anger does not arise and arisen anger is abandoned. So liberation of mind is freedom of the mind, because when your mind's holding on to anger, hatred, and ill will, it's burdening your mind. You're the one that's getting hurt with that. Oftentimes we think we're harming others by holding on to our resentment and our hostility. But this is like trying to burn somebody else by holding on to a hot coal. The only person who's getting burned is you. So the Buddha is saying there's this unarisen anger in your mind. This is the unenlightened mind. It has that fetter of ill will. Like right now, sitting here, you might not be angry, but there's anger in there. There's a mental object of anger or ill will. It's only a matter of time before one of those cravings in your mind gets triggered, and now this ill will is going to arise. So the Buddha is saying the way that unarisen anger does not arise is through loving kindness. By cultivating loving kindness, you can break up this unarisen anger, this mental object or this fetter or pollution of anger, hatred, and ill will. It's loving kindness that does that. And then once anger arises, he's saying the way to abandon that and get rid of that is loving kindness. So that's what you need to be able to have in your tool belt, that whenever you see anger, hostility, frustration, irritation, annoyance starting to arise in your mind, you need to be able to apply right effort to bring in the loving kindness. So if you've cultivated mindfulness or awareness of mind, you'll be aware of your mind and you'll see that anger starting to arise. And now you can bring in your loving kindness, applying right effort, and that's what'll squash that. And eventually you'll completely purify the mind of the ill will through doing these types of things through the Eightfold Path, and now there won't be any ill will, there won't be any anger, and it won't ever arise because there's nothing there. The causes and conditions, this mental object of ill will has been uprooted and eliminated out of the mind. And then that's where you'll go 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, no anger, no frustration, not even annoyment or even dislike towards other beings. So this is the way you do that, is through loving kindness meditation. So this is the meditation. This is just kind of a general structure that I use for teaching, but then I'm going to actually do it with you so that you can see how it's practiced. So what you do is you start typically with the chanting to ease into the meditation. Then you do some breathing mindfulness meditation in order to kind of prepare the mind, get the breath going, focus the mind on the breath. You might do that for about 3 minutes or so, 5 minutes. Then you come in with these affirmations where in the mind, on the out breath, you say in the mind, may I be peaceful, right? And you do that on the out breath. And then you breathe in gradually. And then on the out breath, may I be safe, right? And then you breathe in. And then on the out breath, may I be well. And then on the next out breath, may I be free of all discontentedness and the suffering it causes. Because whenever you're practicing loving kindness in day-to-day life, you need to have loving kindness for this being who you are first, right? You don't go out there and spread yourself thin and deplete yourself, and then somehow that's a good thing, right? You would like to be sure you have loving kindness and even compassion for this being who you are. So that's why the meditation starts with loving kindness for this being. Then you go through these successive rings where you're making these wider and wider rings until eventually you get to all beings. And then you do those same affirmations with all beings. These individual rings that you do in the middle, you're structuring and customizing your meditation based on your specific needs. So you might start with like a ring or two of people you already have loving kindness for. Maybe your parents, your life partner, your children. it's up to you, right? You've got to look at your own mind and see, who do you currently have loving kindness for? And you like to kind of bubble that up with a ring or two. So it might be, may mom and dad be peaceful, right? May mom and dad be safe, well, and free of discontentedness. Then you go maybe to some more neutral people, maybe some coworkers, maybe some neighbors. You don't hate them, but you don't exactly love them either. You're just kind of more neutral about them. And you like to kind of bubble this over into those rings. Then you'd like to get to some rings where you do have anger, you do have hatred towards people. It could be people that are currently in your life, or it could be people long in the past. You'll never even see these people ever again. But if your mind's holding on to anger, hatred, and ill will, it's only harming your own mind. So you would like to include a ring or two of those individuals, right? And then ultimately get to all beings, where you haven't left anybody out whatsoever. And then you go back to the breathing mindfulness meditation, and you come out with the chanting. So it's kind of like a loving kindness sandwich, where you've got loving kindness in the middle, the lettuce and tomato on the outside, that's the breathing mindfulness meditation. And then the bread that's holding it all together is the chanting, right? So this is what you'll do if you would like to eliminate the anger, hatred, or will in your mind, because you can develop this thinking or this thoughts or these right intention of this loving kindness, this active goodwill towards others. And now you can practice it through your speech and your actions and the way that you interact in the world with others. So this is loving kindness meditation. Do you guys have any questions on this? Remember, those of you guys online, you can ask questions through Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom if you like. Any questions on this? Yep, go ahead.
So there's a part of me that thinks about, like, if we have a deep-rooted resentment, maybe hold grudges and anger, that it almost seems like by doing this meditation, it seems like too good to be true in a sense, in terms of, there being like this, just do this meditation and it all gets rid of it. Is there also kind of like a bit of a logical element to it? Because if we're experiencing resentment and anger, and then we do this meditation, right? Again, in that moment, we may be feeling, like sending more peace and contentment and love and just, I guess, goodness to ourselves and others. But I don't know if that necessarily, does that necessarily solve the underlying causes of the resentment? Do you know what I mean? Is it as simple as like cutting it off and letting it go, cutting it off and letting go of the feelings of anger, resentment?
Yeah, so this mental object of ill will is the cause of anger arising. There's central desire, which we talked about yesterday, which is craving, desire, attachment. The mind gets what it wants. It gets the pleasant feelings. It doesn't get what it wants. Those painful feelings comes in. And now this deeply rooted container, this mental object of ill will, starts to arise. And that's where the mind then becomes unskillful through its intentions, its speech, and its actions. Now you start causing harm, and now harm comes back to you in your relationships. So it's not just the meditation that's going to transform this, but what the meditation is doing is essentially rewiring the mind so that now you can go out in the world and you can be more loving and kind through your intention, speech, and actions. It's not going to be just the meditation. That's why the Eightfold Path, it has in there right intention, right speech, and right action, and even right livelihood, so you can learn how to be loving and kind through wise decision making. But you need to rewire the mind so that there's more loving kindness in the mind, and now it's more easy to bring in the speech and the actions and the livelihood to be more loving and kind through your moral conduct. And keep in mind that this meditation, even though you didn't say this, but I'm just going to remind people and share this, is that this meditation is to transform your mind. Sometimes when people learn this meditation, they think it's to change other people, and that's not what it's about. It's about transforming your mind. And it's going to be a gradual wearing away of the ill will. It's not going to be one day or 1 week or even 1 month, because this is a deeply rooted container in the mind. But slowly but surely, you're arising more and more loving kindness in the mind, and you're going out in the world and you're being more and more loving and kind through your intention, speech, and actions. And now when you see the impact that in the past where people would be hostile or bitter or resentful to you, you're starting to see you're being more loving and kind, and you're starting to see more and more loving kindness coming back to you because that's what you're putting out. And this is the proof and helps you to see the wisdom that yes, this natural law of Karma is 100% true. And you can see that these teachings are 100% true because you can see this gradual transformation of your mind, and it works. You can get to the point where there's no anger in the mind whatsoever. Mm-hmm.
And then if somebody has perhaps wronged us out of not, like no provocation, right? Like, I feel like there's still something there that I'm still wrestling with in terms of if someone has wronged me, there's this instant reaction of like, kind of almost like standing taller, fighting back. Like there's that kind of feeling as well. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying it's wise or anything. It just seems like almost like a human nature reaction, like.
This is not only because of the ill will, but this is the central desire that the mind has expectations and cravings of wanting this person to be a certain way. And when they're not that way, the mind will get angry. But it's also partly the personal existence view. As you just said, they have wronged me, right? Well, if there's no me here, they haven't wronged me. They've made an unwise choice, but they haven't done anything to me, right? So if somebody's done something, that's a choice that they made, but I don't need it to affect this mind if you have eradicated the pollutions out of the mind. But with these pollutions in the mind, you're going to react in these situations and you're going to react in unskillful ways. But when you get these pollutions out of the mind, then whatever this person is doing, they're not wronging you, because if there's a you here, yeah, you're going to feel that way. But if there's no you here, if you get rid of personal existence view, which is what we talked about on, I think it was 2 days ago when we talked about eliminating personal existence view. When you get rid of that, then you realize that they're not wronging me. They're just making unwise choices. I don't need to have an expectation of how they should or shouldn't be. And I'm just going to, instead of react in the situation, respond. But this comes through training. I can tell you what to do, but then your mind's not going to be able to just snap your fingers and do it, because you need to be able to train the mind to get rid of these pollutions so that you'll be able to more readily respond in these situations rather than react, which is what the mind does in the unenlightened state with these pollutions.
Cool. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have a question coming in on Facebook here. I think it's pronounced Maya. The question is, when someone at work speaks bad of me, like she is selfish, I will take it seriously, thinking of some of my actions that are selfish, and I will be upset for a long time. What can I do? So when someone's gossiping or slandering you or things like this, this is harming them. And yes, it's harming your reputation. And what's wise in those situations is to do what it sounds like you're doing, which is to look inward and see, is there any truth to this? Even though they're making unwise decisions to slander and gossip, and that's going to ultimately harm them through their unwise conduct. But it's still wise whenever somebody's saying something, even in an unsolicited situation where you're not asking them for advice, it's always wise to look inward and see if there's any truth to the situation of what you're hearing or what you're describing, and then work on that. But then when somebody is damaging your reputation, let's just say with 100% certainty that that's not what you're doing, because even if you're an enlightened being, people are going to still gossip and slander you, right? This practice isn't about changing other people. Even the Buddha, people gossip and slander him, and his mind was enlightened, right? So people are going to still gossip and slander you. This isn't about changing other people, but it's about changing your mind so you're unaffected by that gossip and slander. So when people are gossiping and slandering about you, you got to get to the point where if you don't have personal existence view, you won't be affected by this. But if you have personal existence view, or you have conceit, which is what we're going to talk about today, then your mind's going to be frustrated and agitated and annoyed. So you're going to need to get rid of any expectation that people aren't going to gossip and slander you. People are going to always love you. That's permanence, right? People are always going to like you. That's permanence. You're never going to get to that point where everyone in the world likes you or everyone loves you, right? You're going to need to come to grips with this impermanence, that some people are going to like you and love you and some people just aren't. And when you're getting wind of people gossiping and slandering you, just ignore it. That's the best thing you can do. Going out there and trying to defend your reputation, it isn't going to result in anything beneficial because it's just your own craving, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. You just let it be. If people are going to gossip and slander, it's harming them. You just go forward in life with the people that love you, that like you, that see the good qualities. And of course, you're an imperfect being because you're currently unenlightened. And there's going to be people in your life that are there to support you and encourage you and motivate you. And they know that, yeah, you're an imperfect being just like them. But then you're going to have other people who are also imperfect beings that are gossiping and slandering you and trying to diminish and degrade you and push you down. And in those situations, you're not interested in being around those kinds of people. So you just go forward with the types of people that are supportive and encouraging and positive and uplifting. You can still love these individuals that are gossiping and slandering. Loving meaning you have a genuine interest in their well-being, but they are the ones who needs to choose to do things differently, and you're not going to be able to convince them otherwise. So if they're choosing to gossip and slander, that's on them, and you just go forward in life doing the wonderful things that you would like to do. And all the while, if there's any truth to any of those things, be sure you look inward, and then you improve what you're doing in the world through improved wise decision making. Okay, let's see. I don't see any other questions anywhere. Okay, so if you guys would like to do this meditation, I'm going to do this with you so you can experience it. And when I'm doing it, I'm going to use affirmations that apply to all of us because I'm leading a group. But when you do this, you would like to customize this. You're going to hear me say general statements like, may my family and friends be peaceful, right? But what you would like to do is you would like to customize it. If your brother's name is Bob or your sister's name is Barbara, you would like to use those names when you're doing this on your own because that's going to really help you to transform your mind and rewire the mind. If you have a neighbor that you have anger towards and that person has a certain name, you would like to use that specific name. You can use an individual, you can use a group of people, like say you have hatred towards police officers. You can ultimately do this meditation where you say, may all police officers be peaceful, safe, well, and free of discontentedness, right? So you can customize this meditation on your own, but I'm going to do this meditation in a way that applies to all of us. And I'm going to be doing these affirmations out loud because I'm guiding you guys, but you can do it quietly within your own mind. If I was doing this by myself, I would just be doing it quietly within my own mind. You wouldn't hear me saying these affirmations. So again, I'm going to start with the chanting, then there's going to be some breathing mindfulness meditation, then there'll be a period of time where it's quiet. We'll go into the loving kindness meditation, back to breathing mindfulness, and then we'll come out with the chanting. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakeva Wat Tung Mahakevanhang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakevata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakevato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakeva สัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสานามาสติสตาตาวะมนุสนังโอโตภาควาติ Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that the mind moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. Then I'll be back with more guidance on loving kindness meditation. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Continuing to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. When you get to your next out breath, repeat these affirmations in the mind. May I be peaceful. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May Mom and Dad be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May my family, friends, co-workers, and neighbors all be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May all those who have caused me harm be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May all those who I have harmed be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May all beings, wherever they reside, be peaceful. May all beings be safe. May all beings be well. May all beings be free of discontentedness in the suffering it causes. Now return back to breathing mindfulness meditation, focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเขวาโหตังมหาเขวันนังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเขวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเขวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเขวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสานามาสติสัตตาตาวามานุสนังโอโตภะคะวะติ Okay, if you'd like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Okay, I'm just going to give you guys a little bit of advice about how to integrate this into your practice, because as you guys might remember from our previous talks, I suggested that you guys meditate 2 to 3 times a day for 30 minutes or more. That's what you would like to build up to, realizing that thing can take 6 months, a year, even 2 years. Well, usually the first 4 to 6 weeks of your practice, you're just working on building up your breathing mindfulness meditation practice. That's the primary meditation that you like to start building up. And it takes usually about 4 to 6 weeks to kind of get into the propensity of doing this meditation regularly, that you make the choice to set aside some time, you prioritize it, and you're doing this 2 or 3 times a day. Then after you've got that well established, of course, your mind's not going to be completely peaceful after 4 to 6 weeks, but you've got your practice well established, meaning you understand how to do the meditation and you're having a tendency to do it regularly. And you may even be doing it for 10 minutes or 15 minutes or what have you, but nonetheless, you've got a practice established over 4 to 6 weeks. That's where you'd like to bring in the loving kindness meditation. And typically, if you're bringing in loving kindness meditation in the morning, this is really helpful because you kind of build up the loving kindness in the mind in the morning, and then you go out in your day and you're more loving and kind. And that's not to say that you couldn't do this in the middle of the day or in the evening or something like that, because you surely can. You can do loving kindness meditation multiple times during your day. But out of your 2 to 3 sessions, you would like to have at least one of them that is the loving kindness meditation. And in the morning is an ideal place for this. But that doesn't mean you couldn't do it somewhere else. Say you're coming home from work and someone cut you off in traffic and you're noticing that there's this frustration that's rising up in the mind. Hey, sit down and maybe do some loving kindness meditation so that that anger, that frustration doesn't take hold in the mind, right? So you can do this at any point in time. And if at any point you're noticing doubt arising in your mind about these teachings, keep in mind that nothing that the Buddha taught is about believing the teachings. I'm not teaching you that you should believe that this loving kindness is going to transform your mind. What I'm sharing with you is learn it, investigate it, examine it, reflect on it to independently verify it, and then start practicing it. When you start practicing it, this is where the gradual transformation is occurring. There's nothing in the teachings of the Buddha that is based in belief. You can learn this, you can reflect on it, and you can practice it and see the truth for yourself. And then another thing you can keep in mind whenever any doubts coming into your mind is keep in mind that this individual, Gautama Buddha, or Siddhartha Gautama, as he started off his life, he left the royal palace to go on this journey to enlightenment. And once he attained enlightenment after 6 years, he decided to live this life of homelessness where he was living off the donations of the people around him. He must have experienced something very special, very unique, very remarkable, because how many of you would be willing to leave a royal family and go off on a journey and live a life of homelessness? When he was out there for 6 years, training his mind, he experienced something very remarkable, which is the enlightened mental state. And that's why he didn't go back to the royal palace. Instead, he dedicated the rest of his life to sharing those teachings that it takes to help all of humanity to be able to get to this peaceful and joyful mental state. So you're going to have doubt that arises in your mind from time to time as you're learning these things. You might say, I just can't believe that that particular thing is going to work, or I just can't believe that there's such thing as wholesome or unwholesome karma and that I have to experience my unwholesome karma. These are things that you shouldn't believe, but you can learn them, you can reflect on them, you can practice them, and realize that there's people like the Buddha, there's people like me, there's people like others that have left behind their worldly life and entered into a life where we're just sharing these teachings with others because we know what this mental state is. And if you're able to experience that, that's going to be the very best thing for your life ever. But understand that your mind right now, yeah, it's got certain pollutions. It's got personal existence view. It's got doubt. It's got wrong behavior and observances. It's got sensual desire and ill will. And today we're going to start talking about the higher fetters and moving into that. And these things are going to hinder you and bog you down and make you think that it's just unfathomable that somebody could ever get to complete peace and complete joy where they'll never experience anger ever again. But I'm here to tell you that it's absolutely possible, but you're going to need to be able to see that truth for yourself by learning, reflecting, and practicing. So whenever that doubt is arising, remind yourself that this person didn't go back to the royal palace because he had discovered something that was remarkable and was amazing. And you can figure that out too. If you continue to be dedicated and diligent in your practice, you'll be able to gradually move your mind to this point where you're experiencing nothing but peace and joy. Okay, so do you guys have any questions on loving kindness meditation, either here at the temple or anybody online that you guys would like to ask questions? Okay, let me check here. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to move into talking about these next two fetters because these are actually really simple and easy to talk about, and it doesn't take much time to learn and then understand the solutions. Because remember, I'm explaining to you what it is, I'm explaining to you the symptoms, how to eliminate it, and how to know that you've actually eliminated it. So these two fetters here, we talk about together because they're very similar. This is desire for form and desire for formless. This is where you're going to eradicate the craving for existence in this world and eradicate the fear of death if you have fear of death in the mind. So what desire for form is where the mind has this desire or this craving for existence in one of the form realms, like the animal realm or the human realm. The mind can crave and have a desire for existence in one of these two realms. That's what's called desire for form, that the mind is desiring to exist in this world. There's a longing, there's a yearning, there's a wanting to be here. Then there's desire for formless, which is desire for existence in one of the formless realms, like hell, afflicted spirits, or the heavenly realm. Oftentimes people have desire for formless to exist in the heavenly realm, but there are beings who have a desire to exist in hell or the afflicted spirit realm. And if there's that longing, yearning, and craving and desire for that, That's desire for form or desire for formless. That's what these two fetters are. The symptoms that an individual will experience as a result of these is discontentedness. This is the first one. Anytime there's any kind of craving, desire, attachment in the mind, it's always going to lead to discontentedness. So if somebody has this craving and desire to exist in heaven, for example, they may get really happy and excited when they think about that. Right? Or if they have desire to exist in the animal realm or the human realm, they might get really excited and happy about this kind of thing, thrilled. Or as they're getting close to death, realizing that they can't exist here permanently, there might be some sadness or frustration or agitation coming into the mind. So there's these discontent feelings that can be experienced as a result of these cravings, desires, attachments. Then there's sometimes a fear of death, where the mind fears the death, that the mind doesn't want to let go. It's holding on to this world and it doesn't want to let go. And it maybe even fears what might be coming next. So there can be fear of death, or there can be a wanting to die. Right? If you're in the human realm and you want to be in the heavenly realm, or if you're in the human realm and you want to be in the hell or fixed spirit realm, or you're in the human realm and you want to be in the animal realm, there could be this wanting to die, right? Kind of suicidal thoughts can make the mind potentially want to die. And sometimes these are coming from painful feelings. That's oftentimes where the suicidal thoughts are coming from. But there can just be a wanting to die, that they don't want to be in this human realm perhaps, or maybe they don't want to be in this life in this human realm. Maybe they want to be in a different life within the human realm, and they just want to die in order to get to another existence. Or they might want to be in this world permanently. There can be pleasant thoughts of a new life or wanting a new life. This is some of the symptoms that one can experience when there's desire for form or desire for formless. The solutions or remedies for this is to eliminate the craving, desire, attachment. The way that you eliminate the craving, desire, attachment is breathing, mindfulness, meditation. This is the primary form of meditation that's targeting the cravings, desires, attachments. And you'll need to build that up to 2 or 3 sessions per day for 30 minutes or more and consistently wear away those cravings, desires, attachments while you're arising the mindfulness or awareness of mind and the concentration, the focus, and the clarity. And then the practice of generosity, where you're giving and sharing without any expectation of anything in return. And you would like to do this frequently. The generosity and the meditation, frequency is actually more important than the duration or the amount. So it's not about the amount of something that you might do. It's about the frequency, that you're frequently letting go and letting go and letting go. So if you're only meditating once a week, you're not going to see enlightenment in this life. If you're meditating once a day, okay, that's a good place to start, but you're still not going to see enlightenment in this life. When you build up to 2 or 3 sessions per day for 30 minutes or more, there's a very good opportunity for you to potentially experience enlightenment in this life. So it's the frequency that's more important with meditation and with generosity. Daily, it would be wise to be looking for ways to practice generosity. So it's not about the amount of time or the amount of financial support that you might be giving to a certain organization or a certain place. It's about frequency and doing things frequently and integrating into your life the ability to practice generosity frequently. So these are going to train your mind in general to let go of all cravings, desires, attachments. So whenever we talk about craving, desire, attachment, those two are in there. But in terms of eliminating this desire for form and desire for formless and getting rid of the fear of death, this reflection on death or contemplation of death is something that you would like to do. Now may or may not be that right time. Remember, you need to know your own practice and figure out when's the right time for you to be doing any one particular thing. So I'm just sharing with you all the different fetters and all the different ways to eliminate these things. And now may or may not be the time for you to do this, because you would like to first have a breathing mindfulness meditation practice well developed before you start looking at doing the reflection on death. Because what this is, where you're contemplating death or reflecting on death, is you're closing your eyes and you're putting your mind in the situation where you're imagining your own death. And you might do this for 10 or 15 or 20 minutes where you're sitting quietly and you're kind of playing it out. You're not planning your death. You're not aspiring to die. You're not wanting to die. You're just putting the mind in the situation that it doesn't want to be in. You're thinking through your own death as if you've actually died. Maybe there's been a police officer or a doctor that has informed your family. And now when your family learns about these things, now you kind of play that out. And what's next? Again, you're not planning it out. You're just living it out in your mind where you're confronting this death. Maybe they're planning a viewing, a funeral. Maybe there's family members that are grieving and are upset. Maybe they're throwing a party. I don't know. You'll have to figure that out, right? You put that into your own mind, you reflect on that, and you play that out, and now you're confronting your own death. And you might grieve, and you might be sorrowful, and you might feel miserable during this period of time. And this is normal for your mind to be letting go, and you might notice this fear arising or this sorrow arising in the mind as you're doing this contemplation of death. And then ultimately, you'd like to get to the point where you're restraining the mind and you're cutting this off and letting it go, so that as it's happening afterwards, after you've reflected on your own death, you would like to cut off and let go of any discontentedness that is arising. That's why you would like to have a well-developed breathing mindfulness meditation already well established, right? So that you can train your mind to be able to let go. And then at any point during your day or any point during your day where you're noticing certain thoughts of death arising in the mind, cut that off and let it go. This is what you're doing to restrain the mind and cut back those desires, cut back that longing, yearning. Okay, so this is what you would do in order to eliminate these particular fetters. Then the way that you'll know that these fetters are eliminated is that there will no longer be any fear of death. When you think about death in your day-to-day life, you won't have any fear. Or if you have a dream about death, you won't have any fear when you wake up. You'll just be completely normal with the death. You won't have any desire to die. Sometimes you might have suicidal thoughts or wanting or longing to die. That won't be in your mind anymore. That will be eradicated when you've eliminated these two fetters. The mind will be peaceful and joyful within the present existence without any longing or yearning for another life, nor for an afterlife. Sometimes people have a longing, yearning for an afterlife. They want to exist after this life. The mind can be holding on to that. So you won't have that in the mind. You won't have any interest in any type of existence whatsoever. And that doesn't mean that once you get to enlightenment and you die, that there isn't any existence. Because remember, the Buddha didn't teach whether we do exist or we don't exist. That's an undeclared teaching. But you need to get to the point where your mind is no longer holding on to the world and wanting to exist after this life. If you're continuing to hold on to this world and wanting to exist, you still have craving, desire, attachment. You're going to come back into the world in some existence. So you need to get to the point where you're peaceful and joyful in the present moment, where your mind isn't longing, yearning, and wanting something that you don't have, or wanting eternal life, or wanting to die. The mind will not have worry or have fear or anxiety about what is next after this life, if anything at all. By the time you eliminate these two fetters, that you won't have this worry or anxiety or fear about what may or may not come next, because you will have eliminated any kind of desire for existence by that point. Okay, so this is how you'll know that it's actually been eliminated. So any questions here? Yep, see a couple of people I think have mics. Oh yeah, go ahead, Roxanne.
A couple of pages back, you were talking about people having a desire. Okay, so the desire for existence in form realms or in formless realms, is that like, oh, when I die, I want to be I want to be my rebirth to be here or there? Or is this like a midlife crisis kind of wanting a different life or a different form now?
It can be both of those things.
Okay.
That there's a desire, there's a wanting for, when I die, I want to go into one of these other realms, or right now, what you're describing as a midlife crisis, where I want something different. I want to be in a different life. It's not just that I want to improve my life. I want to improve my current life. That's not what this is. This is, I want to be in a different existence, or I'm holding on to this existence and I want this existence to be permanent. The idea of like the fountain of youth and, eternal life. I understand that there's scientists and researchers working on trying to figure out how humans can live forever. It'll never happen. Those researchers are spending their time, not understanding the universal truth of impermanence, that this isn't actually true. It's not possible to get to the point where humans have eternal life. We arise, we change, when we fade away, and we die. So this desire for form and formless is either wanting a different life than what you have, meaning a different existence, or in another one of these realms. It's not just about improving your current life to become a better person.
Okay. And so I have a little problem with it, the desire for existence in formless realms. It's like, how would one identify with a formless realm and aspire for that in their next rebirth?
There's tons of people in the world that want to go to heaven and be with God for eternity.
Oh, okay, I see.
Right? There's tons of people that want that, and that they've been taught that that's desirable and that's what they should want, and that's the ultimate goal.
So that's the aspiration.
That's what they want.
Yeah,
that's what they want. That's the longing, the yearning. That's what they want. And if they get to this life and they don't get that, they're going to be pretty frustrated, pretty angry, pretty upset, right? And there's people who want to be reborn into the animal realm, or the hell realm, or the afflicted spirit realm, or even back into the human realm. There's different people that have these different wants and this longing and yearning, and you've got to eradicate all that from your mind, where you're content and peaceful in the present moment, and there's not this, I want the next thing. That's just another craving. The grass is always greener on the other side. And that's the whole underlying problem that the Buddha identifies in the Four Noble Truths.
Okay, so the desire for form and formlessness all has to do with death of this lifetime. If there is death, they would want to then be in another existence. Their mind is essentially holding on to the world, wanting to be in the cycle of rebirth, essentially. They might not think of it that way. They might think that, I'm going to die and go to heaven and I'm going to live there eternally. But what they're doing is they're staying stuck in the cycle of rebirth. They're still holding on to the world. They're still holding on to existence, not realizing that this existence is impermanent and their existence in the world is impermanent. Their mind's just continuing to hold on with craving. So then the next thing is, when you have the awareness of ending that cycle of rebirth, how do you not crave that?
Not crave the ending of the cycle of rebirth. So that's where you work at it as a goal, objective, or interest. Because the craving, the desire, we tend to use this word desire like, I want to go to the movies, right? I want a chocolate bar. The more and more you understand these words and what it's really relating to in your mind, you might see that you stop using those words. You won't hear me say those words. Like when I say, hey, would you guys like to meditate? Are you interested in going to the orphanage? Who's interested in going to the orphanage? Who would like to go to the movies? These are the types of things that I say, because the word want and expect and desire, all that's purged from the mind, because the mind doesn't think that way anymore. So oftentimes people have been using these words all throughout their life, like, hey mom, do you want to come with me to the store? We kind of use these regularly, but more and more what you can see is that's the longing, yearning. Because if you say, hey mom, do you want to come to my graduation? And she says, no, I'm not interested in coming. Now you got painful feelings because your mind was craving and longing and yearning for this. And now she's not coming, and now you're angry and frustrated. So continuing to have longing, yearning, wants, expectations, cravings, desires, attachments, it just leads to discontentedness. But then over here, if you're just in relationship to getting out of the cycle of rebirth, if you could just care less what happens to this being, this isn't going to promote peacefulness and joy in your mind either. So you come to the middle where you gradually work towards improving the condition of your mind through training of the mind. And you realize it's a gradual development. It's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. And now you just gradually work towards it where it's truly a goal or objective or an aspiration rather than a chasing after it. Oftentimes people in the unenlightened state, when we set goals, what I call a pure goal is you can be content and joyful whether you obtain that thing or not. But what people are typically used to is if I have a goal and I get it, I'm so happy. And if I have a goal and I don't get it, I'm sad and frustrated. That's not a goal. That's a craving, desire, attachment. A goal would be, hey, I'm going to work towards this thing, realizing that I may obtain it, and that would be great, but I may not, and that's okay too. And that's what you would like to do, is gradually work towards something as a goal, objective, or interest, including enlightenment itself.
I have one more question about the meditation that we did today. Mm-hmm. Because yesterday we were working on that elimination of self. And then when we get to loving kindness meditation, it starts with, may I be. Mm-hmm. And so how is that like appropriate, or do we need to reframe that? Asking to be peaceful, safe, well, and free from cravings?
Yeah, so two things there is, one, you're not asking anybody to be peaceful or safe, because your peace is going to come from your own decisions. This isn't asking for anybody. Sometimes people think loving kindness meditation is like a prayer and asking somebody to intervene, but instead what you're doing is you're cultivating loving kindness for this being who you are. Mm-hmm. And that word I, you're going to notice that you're going to still need that from time to time. Your mind can get to the point where you disassociate with that. Even though you might be using that word, your mind doesn't see it that way. But sometimes when people are trying to get rid of personal existence view and do loving kindness meditation, they change that. They might say, may this being be peaceful. Okay. Or they might use may Roxanne be peaceful. Use your actual name. So if you use the teachings that I shared about personal existence view, about disassociating with the I and the me, you can change that I to a Roxanne or this being or something along those lines. And that can help you. Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. More questions? Yep.
How often the death contemplation? What would you suggest? How often to do that? Like once a week or?
Each person is going to be different, because when you do it, it can be pretty impactful for you, and it can take you, depending on your training, it can take you a few days or even a week or two to really fully get over that, because the sorrow can come in. It depends on how well trained your mind is to be able to cut that off and let it go. And then ultimately you would like to do it again. So it could be once a month, it could be once every 2 weeks, but it's not something that you're going to always do. Breathing mindfulness meditation, you'll always do that, even when you're enlightened. But this contemplation of death or reflection of death, you'll do it for as long as you need it to eliminate your fear of death. And you'll do it in situations with other beings like your parents or close people in order to eliminate your craving, desire, attachment with those relationships. But eventually you'll get to the point where you won't need this anymore. So you're going to need to see how impactful it is to your mind, and being able to regain your composure, and then be able to choose to do it again at whatever point that you might decide. And it could be, like you say, it could be a week, it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. It's going to be on a case-by-case basis, and that's where you need to have the wisdom to know your own mind and what it is that you're ready to actually do. Whereas if you're going to a job interview tomorrow, you probably aren't interested in doing reflection on death tonight, right? Or in the morning, right? So this is where you got to know your own practice, and you got to decide hey, I've got some space here. I don't have anything going on. Let me do this. This would be a good time to do it. And then see how it impacts your mind, see how it regains its composure, and then do it again. And you'd ultimately like to get to the point where you can play that out in your mind, and there's no fear whatsoever. There's no sadness whatsoever. Your mind has just fully accepted your own death, and completely content with it.
And if I'm fine with it, I could do it also daily, right? Or if I have space. Maybe,
Say again.
If I have space, I could do it daily, right? If I have the feeling of, hey, it doesn't affect me so much.
If it's not affecting you so much, you won't need to do it. You won't need to do it daily. So typically, people are doing it at the very most, like once every 2 weeks. And then they're only doing that for a period of time until their mind is fully let go. You probably won't need to do it more than 3 to 6 times, and your mind will let go in that period of time. And then you won't need it for yourself anymore, but you might need it for somebody else, like your parents or something like this, to train your mind to let go of your attachment to them.
So fast, 3 to 6 times. It can be over like 1 month, for example.
You're probably not going to do it in just a 1 month time frame, 3 to 6 months. You would like to spread it out more than that, because you're going to need to knock this down over a consistent period of time. But it's going to be more than just a 1 month finite period.
And about the form and formless desire for them, I don't see it now that I have this, but could it arise after a while? Yeah, because of impermanence, I think so. But is this, or could someone who doesn't have it could say, okay, I can put this aside. I don't have a problem with these fetters.
Okay, so right now, depending on what you're seeing in your mind, you may not see these fetters, but there's a good chance that they're there and you're just not seeing them. The way that I think about it is like you're standing on top of a garbage heap, and when you start cleaning off the top layer of the garbage heap, you kind of drop down and you see more garbage, and then you clear that off, and then you drop down and you see more garbage. So right now, this might be buried deeper in your mind. So when you clear off some of this other pollutions, you might come to understand that this is there. Because like if someone was coming after you, say you had a contract on you to kill you, and somebody was trying to kill you, you might have certain fear about that, and you might take a lot of actions to be able to get away from that. And you might sit in your home and constantly ruminate like, oh my goodness, someone's trying to kill me, and that is not something that you maybe see right now, right? So right now you might think that, yeah, this doesn't exist, but the more you get some of this trash out of the way, you might realize that, oh no, there is something there. And now you'll know what the tools and techniques are to be able to eradicate this from the mind. And that's why you got to be able to decide, pick and choose when's the right time for you to do this, because you need to accumulate enough of the breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity to kind of soften up the mind that it's going to be willing to let go of these fetters. That's why you don't start with eliminating the fetters. What you would like to do is build up your Eightfold Path. That's going to lead you to the jhanas. And now when you're in the jhanas, you pivot and you start focusing on these particular fetters. But all the while, the generosity and the breathing mindfulness meditation is helping you to loosen up the mind, so that now when you're in the jhanas and you start pivoting to focus on the 10 fetters are able to be eliminated at that point, because you've loosened up the mind and it's ready to let go of these pollutions. More questions?
Yeah, my question is also on like the death contemplation. When I've been working with death, like looking at it, revisiting it a few times, it kind of feels like layers of an onion. Like you encounter it and then it gets weaker, but it's hard to tell like if it's gone. Like I feel like it seems like it's gone at times, then I come back and sometimes there's a little bit left. Or and I've also heard, so it's a theory that I'm thinking about and can't experience till you encounter it, but when you encounter death, you may have more buried fear come out that you weren't able to get to. So I mean, maybe is it just mindfulness? Like as I work on breathing mindfulness and concentration gets better, you can get deeper? Or maybe you've answered it already with the garbage heap. Like maybe it's a matter of going deeper, but that's kind of where my current question is, like, is it gone? I keep revisiting it. It looks like it's gone, working on it.
Yeah, this is why just doing it in 1 month doesn't work. You need to spread it out like this, because it's like a wild bush. You cut it back and you cut it back and you cut it back, and you might think it's gone, and then here it comes a little bit. It starts to kind of grow a little bit. You haven't actually uprooted it out of the mind. But when you uproot it out of the mind, you're going to notice these things here, that there's absolutely no fear of death. Like if something happens, like say you're in a traffic, and then say someone cuts off, and if you're there's still some fear there of death, right? And you can notice that, and you may not have been in that situation yet to be able to see that, and that's where you cut that off and you let it go. Or if you've had a dream about dying, and maybe you don't have that dream for another 3 months or 6 months, and maybe you wake up and you had that dream, and now you see there's still some fear there, and that's where you would like to do this contemplation of death to knock it down. And when you wake up from that dream, cut off that fear, don't allow that fear to permeate in the mind. But you're going to notice these things when these two fetters are completely gone.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yep.
Yesterday, we were doing the affirmation within a meditation for I'm not my body, I'm not my mind. And I was reminded at that time, and more so today, about an incident that happened in the Buddhist world some years ago. And it was in Vietnam, when a Buddhist monk set himself on fire. And I think it was became known as the burning monk. And
Became known as what? Became known as what? I didn't hear you.
The burning monk was the turn of phrase that was used in the West.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
The burning monk.
Oh, okay.
And subsequently, another 6 or 10 monks in Vietnam set themselves on fire. And in some parts of the world, this was the first introduction to what was going on in Vietnam prior to the war. And as I understand it, the leaders of the country at the time were Catholic. I happen to come from a Catholic country, but they were Catholic, and they were against the Buddhists. So I am wondering, in the light of what we're speaking about here yesterday and today, what would the Buddhist community have thought of that protest at that time? And have you any comments on it, please?
Yeah, when you see these things, it's important to understand that the Buddha never taught those things, because that's craving for non-existence. The very first teaching of the Buddha in the Four Noble Truths, he teaches about eliminating the craving for non-existence. So even though someone considers themselves a Buddhist monk, they might be wearing clothes like a Buddhist, they might shave their head, they might be living at a temple, it doesn't mean that they're practicing the teachings of the Buddha. And the Buddha actually gives a story about this, a simile. He talks about during his life, he says, if I'm a cow and I'm walking on soft earth, and I'm leaving hoof prints behind, and there's a donkey behind me putting his hoofs in my hoof prints, and the donkey is thinking, I'm a cow, I'm a cow, I'm a cow. Does that make the donkey a cow? And the answer is no, it doesn't make the donkey a cow. So just because someone shaves their head or puts on a robe or lives at a Buddhist temple and considers themselves a monk, it doesn't mean they're practicing his teachings. That's essentially the moral of his story. Because during his lifetime, there were countless people that were learning and practicing his teachings, but not everybody was practicing them closely, and he was aware of that, right? But he just accepted everybody to learn and understand his teachings if they had a sincere interest to be able to learn and understand. And as I was talking earlier, he experienced this remarkable, amazing mental state, or else, he wouldn't have done the work that he did to be able to share it with others. And not only him, but countless other people were experiencing this mental state too. And that's why they spent the time that they did after his death to document his teachings. And that's why they've been around for 2,500 years, because they work. But nowadays, 2,500 years after his death, there's people that are really far away from what the Buddha taught, just so far away. You just spend a little bit of time in Buddhist Facebook groups, and you'll be able to see this, all the arguing and bickering and fighting over things and people complaining about this, that, and the other thing. So you'll see people in the ordained community who aren't practicing the teachings and setting yourself on fire. There's no aspect of that that is based in the teachings of the Buddha. It's exactly the opposite of his teachings. Yep.
Thank you. So, why does the mind crave to exist if existence is so burdensome? This is dependent origination?
Yes, everything comes back to ignorance or a knowing of true reality. The longing, yearning, the craving only exists because of the misunderstanding, the lack of wisdom. So that's why we're going to study that tomorrow, because the last fetter is ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. So I'm going to show you independent origination first before we talk about that fetter, so you can see what's keeping the mind trapped in this continuous cycle, that because of its unknowing of true reality, its lack of wisdom, it continues to crave. If it wasn't for the misunderstandings of the mind, it wouldn't actually continue to crave. But because of the lack of wisdom, the mind experiences those pleasant feelings and it starts to cling and crave to those. And this is where that's why you're not interested in feeding people's cravings. When people are craving and trying to grab onto you, this is what we were talking about last night in class. When people are trying to grab onto you and they're trying to cling to you, and they're going to get those pleasant feelings, and it basically confirms for them, with their lack of wisdom, like, whoa, this pursuit of craving was worthwhile because I got my reward. I got my pleasant feelings. And now you're just reinforcing craving when we were talking last night in class about blowing up your phone, like when someone's texting you or calling you constantly, and you either pick up the phone or you send them a message right away and reply to them, you're just feeding their craving. And now they get those pleasant feelings and they're like, this was worthwhile. I'm going to do this again. Next time I call them and they don't answer the phone, I'm just going to blow up their phone with a bunch of text messages, because eventually they're going to respond to me. And then I get my craving fulfilled. I get my pleasant feelings. So the mind's lack of wisdom, or this unknowing of true reality, it chases and chases and chases. So you might chase after that new job. Wow, you get it. You get the new salary, you get the new job title, you get the new car and the house to go along with the increased salary. And now you're like, wow, that chase was worthwhile. And now you feel great for 3 years or 5 years, but then you lose your job and you feel miserable, but you don't associate it, because of the lack of wisdom. You don't associate it with the craving, desire, attachment. So now the mind goes out and chases some more, and it chases the next thing or the next thing or the next thing, and the mind just stays stuck in this continuous cycle because of its lack of wisdom. It doesn't realize that. That's why I like that example at the airport where your airplane was delayed and then the mind wanted the caramel popcorn even though you weren't hungry. This is a perfect example to see how the mind, when it's experiencing a certain amount of discontentedness, either painful feelings or neither painful nor pleasant, it will tend to crave something. This is why you come home from the end of a hard day at work and someone might crave an alcohol, have a drink, or they might crave sex or gambling or shopping or something like this, because they've got these painful feelings. And because of the lack of wisdom, the mind doesn't realize it's being caused by craving, desire, attachment. But the mind's uncomfortable with these painful feelings, and it wants to get back to something that's somewhat comfortable. And the only way that the unenlightened mind knows how to do that, because of its lack of wisdom, is to crave something. So it craves, and now it gets to these pleasant feelings. And then, now I've got what I was looking for, which is these pleasant feelings. And now it kind of reinforces the chase. But that's just because of the lack of wisdom, and it's going to continue to stay stuck like that until you figure it out through the Four Noble Truths and the rest of these teachings. Mm-hmm.
And do you think that animals can desire to stop being alive, like suicidal?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know 100%, but I would think so. I mean, you see some animals do things that is like, detrimental to their well-being, and but they do it anyway because of their lack of wisdom.
Okay, and lastly, did Gautama Buddha teach about how formless beings can die?
He didn't talk about like their cause of death. He just talked about kind of like the expiring of their lifespan, that they basically have a certain lifespan and then they kind of expire, so to speak. but because there's no physical form, they can't die from like a heart attack or things like this. They just have a kind of a set lifespan, and they live out that lifespan, and then they die. Okay, let me see if we have any questions online.
Leela had her hand up for a long time, but she took it down.
Oh, okay. Leela had her hand up. She must have got an answer to her question, and probably somebody else asked it. Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions anywhere else. So what I'm going to do then is just end here and give us a break. So it's basically about 13 minutes to 11. So why don't we take a really nice, 22, 23 minute break, start back up at 11:10. And that's where I'm going to teach you about the fetter of conceit. This is part of the ego. So I'm going to teach you what it is, teach you the symptoms, how to eliminate it, and how to know that you've actually eliminated it. So enjoy your break, and I'll start over at 11:10. Okay, so thank you guys for your questions. Thanks for your interest, and we'll see you in a bit.